Do you have a hard time saying no to sugar, especially during stressful times? Or maybe you've noticed an overwhelming craving for sweets when you're feeling anxious or sad or overwhelmed. Or maybe when you're not even feeling anything at all. It might seem surprising, but those cravings might have roots that go all the way back to your childhood. This connection becomes even more important when you consider that people who have experienced childhood trauma already face a higher risk for chronic health conditions like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, arthritis, depression, and metabolic dysfunction. Eating a lot of sugar increases the risk of these very same diseases and worsens them over time. This is why understanding this connection is so important, not just for healing your relationship with food, but for also protecting your long-term health and longevity. Hi, I'm Valerie, a lifestyle nurse. I believe that no matter your age, your current health status, or your background, that you have the power to take charge of your well-being and live a longer, healthier life. My goal is to share with you the knowledge and tools that will empower you to make that happen. In this video, I am talking about the powerful and often overlooked connection between experiencing childhood trauma and sugar dependence. This is one of those topics that hits home for so many people, and understanding this connection can get you started on the path toward healing and breaking your dependence on sugar. So let's talk about how trauma can shape our relationship with food, especially sugar, and how you can break free from the emotional and biological loops that keep you reaching for sweets. If you experience trauma in childhood, especially chronic or repeated trauma like abuse, neglect, or living in an unstable home, you may have developed ways of coping that helped you survive emotionally. Childhood trauma or chronic stress experienced in childhood changes the way our mind and body functions, often for life. And one of the ways this shows up can be in your relationship with sugar. Children who grow up in environments filled with fear, neglect, instability, or abuse often don't get the reliable emotional support that they so desperately need. It doesn't always come from something dramatic. It can come from what was missing. Many adults who experience childhood trauma might not even realize it. If you're curious whether this applies to you, check out my video, Did You Experience Childhood Trauma, for more insight. In the absence of comfort or safety, or not having emotional needs met, children might discover that sweet foods offer temporary comfort. That relief becomes a primary coping mechanism. And that learned association doesn't just fade away as one grows older. It gets hardwired into the nervous system and emotional coping habits. And it is more than just emotional. It is neurobiological. In adulthood, this can look like reaching for candy or baked goods during a stressful workday or binge eating sweets late at night. Sugar becomes a tool to numb the pain, to fill a void, or just to momentarily feel better. And while it does work for a moment, the crash that often follows leaves people feeling worse, stuck in a vicious cycle of emotional eating and self-blame. This is not a matter of willpower. This is about your brain trying to protect you in the only way that it knows how. In fact, studies have found that women with PTSD symptoms are significantly more likely to meet the criteria for food addiction. The more trauma symptoms that they reported, the more likely they were to describe sugar cravings or loss of control around food and continued use of those foods despite knowing it was harming their health. Trauma impacts two key systems that drive sugar cravings: the dopamine reward pathway and the HPA axis, which is our stress response system. These are both emotional and biological. Dopamine is our brain's feel-good chemical. Trauma can actually blunt our dopamine response or our ability to feel pleasure from everyday activities. That is why people who experience chronic stress as children often describe feeling flat or emotionally numb. This reward deficiency makes sugar especially potent. It provides the dopamine hit that the brain is so desperate for. And over time, the brain adapts to this pattern. developing tolerance and craving just like it would with any other addictive substance. Sugar stimulates the dopamine release, giving a quick burst of pleasure. For someone whose baseline mood is usually pretty low, that burst is incredibly appealing. And over time, the brain starts to rely on sugar as a go-to source for that pleasure. And now, the HPA axis. This is the system that controls stress hormones like cortisol. People with trauma histories often have disrupted cortisol patterns. Some have chronically low levels, which can cause fatigue and blood sugar crashes. Others have spikes that make them anxious or on edge. In both cases, the body may drive cravings for quick energy, like sugar, to stabilize how we feel, or to boost energy when cortisol isn't doing its job. And then there is also the inflammation factor. Trauma and sugar both drive inflammation in the brain and in the body. High sugar intake promotes inflammatory chemicals, and trauma itself has been linked to elevated inflammation markers. Along with increasing the risk of many chronic diseases, inflammation affects neurotransmitters like serotonin, which regulate mood. That's one reason why so many people with trauma history also struggle with depression or chronic pain. Unfortunately, the sugar that they turn to for comfort is also fueling the inflammation that is keeping them feeling stuck. This cycle, so emotional distress, sugar intake, momentary relief, followed by a crash and more distress, is incredibly common in trauma survivors. But it's also something that can be interrupted. And the good news is that there are holistic trauma-informed strategies that work without medication. For many trauma survivors, sugar has become a dependency. Neuroscientists have shown that sugar activates the brain's reward system in ways similar to other addictive substances. This is not about lack of control. It is about your biology doing exactly what it was trained to do, to seek relief in the most accessible ways possible. And when relief feels scarce, sugar becomes a powerful, although temporary, escape. So understanding this is very important. It's not about blaming yourself. It is about recognizing the survival mechanisms that your brain developed in response to pain. When we view our behavior through this lens of compassion and trauma awareness, we give ourselves the power to change it. If sugar has been your primary tool for coping, it is important to understand that moderation does not always work because sugar can be profoundly addictive. This is why setting clear, consistent boundaries is one of the most important steps that you can take. Most people find success with total abstinence, so 0 added sugars, while others set a firm limit, like no more than 4 grams per day, or no product with more than 2 grams of added sugar. What matters most is that the limit is clear, and it's one you can commit to. And this small amount is likely not enough to trigger reward pathways. And let's be specific about what we mean by added sugar. These are not the natural sugars found in whole fruits or dairy foods that also contain fiber, protein, and nutrients that can help slow sugar absorption. Added sugars are substances extracted from plants and concentrated to make them sweeter. This includes many so-called natural sweeteners like honey, maple syrup, coconut sugar, and agave. They might be marketed to seem healthier, but the body, and especially the brain, treats them almost identically to table sugar and corn syrup. Added sugar is hiding everywhere. It goes by more than 100 different names on ingredient labels, and it's especially sneaky in foods that appear to be healthy. So while I show you this list of common added sugars, take a moment to see how many of them you already know and how many are completely new to you. These sugars show up in food products like granola bars, salad dressings, yogurt, even bread. And just because something says organic or natural doesn't mean that it is free of added sugar. Companies have learned how to disguise it using names you might not recognize right away, and that is a big part of the problem. The easiest way to spot it is to check the added sugars line on the nutrition facts label. And I'm showing an example of that here. Reading ingredients and nutrition facts closely is a skill that becomes second nature over time when you are trying to avoid sugar. Giving up added sugar can feel daunting, but it is absolutely possible, and there are specific ways to support your brain and body through this transition, so the cravings become less intense and your energy more stable. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about next. One of the most effective ways to begin healing your relationship with sugar is to make sure that your body is actually getting the nutrients that it needs. That starts with stabilizing your blood sugar through nutrient-dense meals. And one of the most important pieces of this is eating enough vegetables, at least 6 servings per day. Vegetables are packed with fiber, antioxidants, and essential micronutrients that your brain and body need to function well. And when those needs are not met, cravings often begin to set in. Build your meals around plenty of vegetables, but also make sure to include quality protein, healthy fats, and fiber-rich carbs. Anti-inflammatory foods like leafy greens and omega-3 rich fish don't just nourish you, they help calm both your nervous system and your brain. And while you don't have to eliminate every source of sugar overnight, gradually crowding out processed sweets with whole food alternatives can make a big difference in how you feel, both physically and emotionally. Making sure you get enough protein is also important, but many protein sources can raise inflammation. So look for anti-inflammatory and less inflammatory proteins like fish, beans, tofu, or pasture-raised poultry. Supplementing with whey protein is another good choice. Whey protein has actually been shown to lower inflammation, but make sure to check those ingredients because many contain sugar while others may contain sucralose, which is also inflammatory. Look for grass-fed whey isolate or concentrate with only just a couple ingredients. Other small changes like eating at regular intervals, not constantly grazing, and avoiding other highly processed sugary foods can make a big difference. Slowly, your energy will even out, your mood will stabilize, and the cravings can start to quiet down. Maintaining gut health is also important. There's a direct link between the gut and the brain. Trauma can disrupt the gut microbiome or the trillions of bacteria that live in our digestive system. And sugar feeds the bad bacteria, further fueling an imbalance that can worsen mood and increase cravings. By feeding your gut with fiber-rich foods, fermented vegetables, and probiotic-rich yogurt or kefir, you support a healthier gut environment, and you can support better mental health too. It's another piece of the puzzle that shows just how interconnected our bodies truly are. Nutrition is powerful, but nutrition alone is not enough. If sugar has been your primary way of coping with stress, it is essential to create new ways to calm your nervous system. And just as important to actually schedule those moments into your day. When stress builds up and cortisol stays high, cravings tend to follow. But when you consistently break that cycle with intentional stress relief, your body starts to relearn safety without relying on sugar. This can be as simple as taking a 5-minute break every few hours to step away from your phone or computer and do some deep breathing. Try inhaling for 4 counts, hold for 4, and exhale for 6. Just a few rounds of this can calm your body and settle your mind. You can also try setting a daily alarm as a reminder to pause and stretch. A few shoulder rolls, some neck stretches, or even standing up and walking around the room can release tension that builds up without you realizing it. Yoga is another great tool, and you don't need a long session of fancy poses. Just 10 minutes of gentle stretching or following a beginner yoga video on YouTube can help regulate your breath, lower stress hormones, and reestablish a sense of connection with your body. Some other methods to bring down stress are things like progressive muscle relaxation, guided meditations like on the Insight Timer app or the Calm app, and some visualization exercises. Even adult coloring books can be a great way to relax. These breaks might seem like small things to do, but they send a powerful message to your nervous system. I am safe. I don't need sugar to get through this. And over time, that rewires your stress response and supports lasting change. Sleep is another huge piece of the puzzle. When we are tired, we crave sugar for quick energy. Prioritizing good sleep hygiene, like keeping a regular bedtime or a regular calming nighttime routine, and keeping a cool, dark sleep environment can dramatically shift those patterns. I have several videos on my channel on how to improve sleep quality, so look out for them. And last, don't underestimate the power of support. You do not have to do this alone. Whether it's a trusted friend, a therapist, a coach, or just someone who gets it, having someone to talk to can help break the isolation that trauma often creates. And when you feel seen, understood, and supported, your need for sugar as a coping mechanism naturally starts to fade. If you have struggled with sugar cravings and emotional eating, and you've had a history of trauma, it is not your fault. What you are experiencing is a natural response to pain, a pattern wired into your brain and your body. But you are not stuck. With the right tools like nutrient-rich food, steady routines, gut health, support, movement, rest, and emotional care, you can begin to break the cycle. You can create new patterns that actually support your healing instead of just masking the pain. And if you are ready to take this work even deeper, I offer one-on-one personalized wellness support. If you want help making the shift away from sugar and toward a lifestyle that supports your long-term health and longevity, I would love to work with you. You don't have to do this alone. You can find a link in the video description to learn more and schedule a free discovery call with me. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel for more content on a trauma-informed approach to living a longer, healthier life. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, please take good care of yourself.